It is time, my friends. Time to decide which one will live and die. Time to decide which is the crowning winner of this year's school prom queen ceremony. Time to decide if it's okay to like Indiana Jones 4. I mean, I like it. It's not the best in the series, but whatever. It is time for Original Against Remake! Out there in the gaming industry, there exist so many great games that will stand out through time. But sometimes it's always nice to give the original or updated version for newer generations to enjoy. So, on this new segment of my show, I'll be comparing the original version of a game and compare it to its remake to see which is better. And so on this first episode of Original Against Remake, we're gonna take a look at one of my favorite N64 games of all time, StarFox 64. Well, once you really think about it, StarFox 64 isn't really much of a new game. It had the same story as the Super Nintendo game. Most of the game mechanics came from the first and the cancelled sequel. But who cares? It's StarFox 69! Wait, aside from Mario, Diddy Kong, and Pokemon Stadium 2, StarFox was one of the many games I played the most on the N64 as a kid. And how could you blame me? It had outstanding gameplay, amazing 3D graphics, memorable characters and dialogue, and it still lasts today as a pop culture icon to the gaming community. Even Google loves it. And it doesn't really come as a surprise that 15 years later, 3DS fans will receive a remake of the game, stupidly titled StarFox 64 3D. I have to admit, when I heard about the remake, I was a bit excited. Not majorly, I was mostly focusing on the other 3DS titles coming out. But when I got the game, it was pretty fun, and it was almost as good as the original. Even IGN gave it a higher rating than the N64 game. But once you really think about it, IGN can sometimes be the Fox News of gaming. IGN sucks! But which one is better, StarFox 64 or StarFox 64 3D? Seriously, why this stupid title? Well, join me my friends, as today we're gonna compare the two in Original Against Remake. Before I go on, let me just say that getting footage for the 3DS version wasn't easy. I'm not an expert on recording game footage from a handheld, aside from, well, using my crappy camera to do all the work. Also, any good footage that I found on YouTube that was in English was the Cornelia level by whoever the YouTube user is on this comment section right there. In any case, I apologize for a lack of good quality 3DS footage. And before we get into the actual gameplay footage, let's take a look at the title screen. I know it seems kinda odd, but there's a reason why. In the 3DS version, you just move the system around to see empty space. And that's pretty much it. In the original N64 game, if you move the analog stick around during the title screen, something magical happens. The game itself plays a lot like a 3D arcade-like shooter. You shoot enemies and dodge obstacles to get to the boss at the end of each level. One thing that makes the game replayable are these different planets you can take if you do some different stuff, whatever. So say for example, you say Falco, then you fly through all the arches, and then you get to go inside this waterfall. Okay, which makes the game even more replayable. You could just spend hours and hours trying to get to each planet with all these different pathways and obstacles. But now anyone can just go on GameFAQs.com to find these areas. Thank you, Internet, for making gaming easier than it needs to be. Bricks. So moving on, what does the remake offer? It still keeps all the same stuff that the N64 had, although there are two ways on how you could play it. There's the N64 mode, which just uses the classic controls much like the original. Then there's the 3DS mode, which utilizes the 3DS's gyroscope instead of using the circle pad. And I'm not gonna lie, I'm not a fan of the gyroscope. Not that it's majorly bad or anything, but it just feels cruel to me. Sometimes it's hard to hit a target with you going up and down with the system, and for me to get the gyroscope to work, I have to hold the 3DS up instead of resting the system on my lap. Which I'm not gonna complain much, but it does make my arms a bit numb. I mean, I can understand putting motion controls on a home console, but putting motion in a handheld? That's just weird. Isn't adding 3D technology to the system gimmicky enough? And maybe this is just a nitpick, but it makes you look like an idiot while using it.
Yes, sir!
Alright, so besides those two modes, one that's completely pointless, what else is added to the game? Well, nothing much. To be fair, the game itself acts way too much like the N64 version, and there really isn't much new content added to the game to make it as replayable as the original. I also heard that there's no online multiplayer in the game, but considering the fact that my internet sucks and I don't know anyone else who has the game, that's not much of a complaint on my behalf. I do, however, admire the updation on the graphics and the music. The 3DS one seems a bit more brighter than the N64 one, so you can admire the backgrounds a bit more. Oh sure, the N64's graphics are marvelous and they still stand out today, but the 3DS one I just like a little bit more. Even the 3D effect works great on the game, and the music on the 3DS one sounds a bit more, how could you say, epic. It sounds more up to date as, in my opinion, some of the soundtracks on the N64 game are a bit dated. Here's a back-to-back comparison. However, what makes StarFox 64 for me are the voice actors. I think that StarFox 64 has some of the best voice acting in video game history. Now there are many games out there that have some great voice acting in general, but sometimes in shows, movies, and video games that have voice acting in them, sometimes I can't really get invested with the voices as much as I would want to. And it's not that the actors themselves are doing a horrendous job or anything. Voice acting isn't really as easy as it looks. But what makes an animated character feel real is the voice. If I have the sense of an actor just voicing the lines behind a microphone, I can't really enjoy the whole character that I want to. Like, say for example, in Garfield the movie. Yeah, a weird example, but let me explain. You know how Bill Murray did the voice for Garfield? Well, I didn't really give into the voice. Now let me just say that I love Bill Murray. Talk to everybody! Action! I'm a finger! Now before anyone goes ranting on me, let me just say that I love Bill Murray. He's a great actor and all, but when he voiced Garfield, I just kept having an image of Murray just voicing the lines behind a mic instead of enjoying the whole character in general. Granted, the film is total garbage, but that's an example of how I feel in those situations. StarFox 64 is the perfect example of tremendous voice acting in video games. The voices are easily recognizable and matches each character perfectly. Sure, the dialogues are goofy and are cheesy as hell, but that's what made the voices much more believable and so much enjoyable as well. The original voice cast are of course well rememberable, and practically anyone who at least played the game can remember each single dialogue spoken from each character because of the superb voice work.
Do a barrel roll! You've got an enemy on your tail! I guess I should be thankful.
Fox, get this guy off me!
Hey Einstein, I'm on your side!
But what about the remake? With a game that's about 15 years old, you don't really expect any of the original voice actors to return. So it just seems logical to just get new voice actors to play them. But how well does the new cast sound? Do they sound as awesome and epic like the original? Well, slightly. Now don't get me wrong, the new voice actors do really well in this game, and they sound almost as good as the original. but at times I think that they were trying a little too hard to try to make the voices sound exactly like the original, and sometimes they overact the lines.
Hello! Help me! You're becoming more like your father. It's quiet. Too quiet. I've got you now!
So after all that, is the 3DS one better than the N64 version? Well, maybe, for newcomers to the series. But for me and many others, I still think that StarFox 64 is the better game. Don't get me wrong, the remake is amazing. It's great that they updated StarFox 64 for the 3DS, but this really isn't anything to say that makes it better than the N64 version. There was no new content added to the game, and yeah, I'm not a fan of the gyroscope, so it's pointless to me. It just acts too much like the original. Not that it makes it bad or anything, but it would have been nice if they added something for us to come back to it. The original N64 game is still the best in my opinion, and it continues to be one of my favorite video games of all time. However, I do recommend buying the 3DS remake. It has some really great graphical and musical updates to it, but still, the original still wins, the N64 game. And that was my first episode of Original Against Remake. I hope you all enjoyed it, and if you want to request the next game, just comment. Please. It would be grateful if you do. It'll just take you like 30 seconds tops to comment. Maybe less if you're a fast typewriter. Thanks for watching and have a super mega chocolate fun awesome day.
Really? That's it? You're not gonna do anything funny or something?
Not really, no.
Do a f***ing barrel roll!
Yes, sir! Whee!